The bench in the holding cell sat at chest height. Marcus sat on the floor. Not a protest, not a statement, just math. The floor was closer to the ground, and the ground was the one thing in this entire alien palace that behaved predictably. He put his back against the wall and stretched his legs out and looked at the ceiling, which was also too high, because apparently everything in this place had been designed for someone with an extra foot of height and a completely different relationship with furniture. The food they had given him tasted like copper and old cardboard. He ate it anyway. He had eaten worse. He had eaten nothing, which was worse than cardboard. He filed this meal somewhere between those two data points and kept going. They came for him on the third morning. 2 guards, tall, gray-skinned, eyes the color of polished stone that had not yet decided what it wanted to be. They did not speak. They did not have to. The door opened and the direction was obvious, and Marcus stood up from the floor, brushed off his knees out of habit, and walked. Barefoot because they had taken his boots on arrival, and nobody had thought to ask whether that mattered to a human. It mattered. Boots are armor in a different category than the kind that stops things. They are the armor between you and the specific vulnerability of being somewhere you did not choose. He did not say any of this. He walked. The corridor was long in the way that power likes its corridors to be long. Something carved from a material that was not quite stone and not quite metal, a pale gray-gold color that hummed at a frequency too low to hear but present enough to feel in the back of the teeth. Marcus counted doors. 14. He counted guards. 8 visible, 2 more working the shadows at the corridor bends. He counted turns. 3 left, 1 right. Old habit. Habits like that kept certain people alive through Karev 3 and other places he was not thinking about right now. The chamber at the end of the corridor was enormous in the particular way that important rooms are enormous. Not because space was limited and they needed the room, because the size was the message. Everything in it was calibrated to make the person standing in the center of it feel exactly how they should feel, which was small, which was watched, which was accountable. He stopped where the guards indicated, looked around without appearing to look around. A half circle of elevated seating, filled with beings informal where that communicated rank in ways he had not yet decoded but could feel. The ceiling was a long way up. The floor was cold through his bare feet. Then she walked in. The whole room reorganized itself around her arrival, not because anyone moved dramatically. Just a collective, quiet shift, the way iron filings shift toward a magnet without fanfare, simply because that is what they do when the field changes. She was taller than Marcus by almost a head, deep amber skin, the kind of amber that looks like it has something preserved inside it, something old and important caught mid-motion. Her eyes were pale, very still. They found him immediately, the way a compass needle does not search for north but simply stops, because the searching is over. She sat. Everyone else in the room had already been seated. She opened a file. His file. She read it the way someone reads a maintenance evaluation on a machine they are considering whether to keep running. Even pace. No performance. No drama in the delivery, which somehow made it land harder than drama would have. Marcus Vale, she said, human. Age 31, born on Earth, assigned designation Detroit region, enlisted at age 19. Campaign service record includes Yeva Station, the Drent Corridor, Harlow Outpost, the second engagement at Bellion and Karev 3. She paused there, just a fraction, just long enough to mean something. Confirmed engagement eliminations, 37. Major campaigns survived, 6. Unit survival rate across all listed engagements. Another pause, longer, waited, sitting on top of him like a hand pressed flat on a chest. 0%. Excluding present subject. The room made a sound, not words, a sound, the kind that happens when something lands. She looked up from the file. Her gaze was not hostile. That was the thing. Hostile would have been easier. It was clinical. The way a scientist looks at a confirmed result that the experiment took a long time to produce, satisfied and slightly tired and completely beyond argument. You are the only member of your unit to survive any of your major combat engagements, she said. Across 6 campaigns, every soldier operating alongside you has died. You have not. The mathematical probability of this outcome occurring through chance is negligible, approaching 0. The court proceeds on the assumption that your survival pattern is not coincidental, that you are, in some operational sense, a contributing factor in the outcomes that surround you. She set the file down, folded her hands. Human military history is the longest continuous record of organized destruction in the documented galaxy, she said. Your species has been engaged in active conflict with each other and with others for the entirety of your historical record. You have developed weapons capable of ending climates. You have deployed them. Your soldiers, by age 31, carry elimination records that senior Oran commanders rarely accumulate in full careers. She looked at him directly, fully. Your species does not produce heroes. It produces effective instruments and then constructs mythology around them so that it can continue to sleep. You are, she said, a predator in a uniform. The room agreed, softly, thoroughly, the kind of agreement that comes from people who have already thought this and are relieved to have it stated officially. She looked at him with the expression of a confirmed result. Marcus looked at the ceiling, counted the structural ribs running along it. 7. He looked back at her. He said nothing. The silence stretched, long enough that it stopped being a pause and became a response of its own. He could see, just at the edge of her composure, a slight recalibration, not surprise. She did not do surprise publicly, but something, a minor adjustment, the way a precision instrument makes a small correction. She had expected defense. She had expected denial, the predictable human reaction to being categorized. He gave her nothing. You spelled my name wrong, he said. The room held very still. The spelling in the file is correct, she said. It is veil with an A-E, he said. You have it written as V-E-I-L like a curtain. I am not a curtain. One of the court members made a sound, not a word, an objection with no grammar. She looked down at the file, looked back up. The error is noted, she said. Her voice had not changed, not even at the edges. He nodded, appreciate it. The hearing ran for 2 more hours. They asked him about troop movements he did not have, about human fleet strategy he was not authorized to share, about the larger war, its origins, its trajectory, its probable end. He answered what he could answer. He said he did not know when he did not know. He said he was not going to answer that when he was not going to answer that. Politely. The way a person declines a second helping of something they did not particularly want the first time. At the end of it, she looked at him once more. You will remain in custody pending further deliberation. The court has not yet determined whether you are a prisoner of war, a documented war criminal, or something that does not yet have a sufficient category in our existing framework. He thought about that. Can I get different food? He said. What you gave me tastes like the inside of a power cell. No one laughed. He had not expected them to. Walking back down the corridor, 3 left 1 right, 14 doors, he thought about what she had said. Not the part about killers and myths. He had heard versions of that before, including from people standing on the same side of the line as him. He had even thought it himself on a few occasions at 3 in the morning when sleep was not available and honesty was. The part that stayed with him was the math. 0%, excluding present subject. He knew that math. He had been carrying it since Karev 3 like a stone in a coat pocket. Too heavy to forget, too familiar to put down. The cell was the same, bench too high, floor the right temperature. He sat down. He ate the rest of the food that tasted like a battery. He thought about dirt, real dirt, not synthesized, not processed and measured and optimized. The kind that smells like something lived in it recently and might again if you paid attention. His boots were still somewhere in this building. Someone had them. Not his worst Tuesday. The scholar assigned to document him arrived the following morning. His name was Dreva, 4 arms, which he used simultaneously in a way that Marcus found genuinely impressive and slightly unsettling to watch at first, like seeing someone type on 2 keyboards at once while drinking coffee and making notes on a third document. 3 eyes arranged vertically on a face that was, depending on the angle, either very old or quite young. A recording device in one hand, a writing instrument in the second, a secondary notation tool in the third, a mug of something steaming in the fourth. Dreva was enthusiastic in the specific way that people are enthusiastic when they have been given access to something they have been wanting to study for a long time and are attempting not to make that too obvious. "You may speak freely," Dreva said on the first morning, settling into a chair across the room that was positioned for observation while appearing to be positioned for comfort. "Everything you say will be recorded and transcribed for scholarly documentation. You should not feel observed." "I feel observed," Marcus said. Dreva wrote that down. The cell had been changed. Not to a cell anymore, technically. A room with a window, set high in the wall, the kind of window that lets light in without making escape convenient. The bench had been replaced with furniture at human height. Someone had taken actual measurements. He was not sure how he felt about that. The care of it sat in a slightly uncomfortable place, like a courtesy from someone who has not decided yet whether you deserve it. He asked for dirt on day 3. Not synthesized substrate. Not a planting module or a growing tray or anything from the palace growing rooms, which he had seen through the window and which were precise and clean and completely. Entirely wrong in the way that 2 clean things are wrong when you are trying to grow something that wants a little history in the soil. Dirt. The actual word took Dreva 4 attempts to translate correctly because the Oran language had 17 distinct terms for different grades of growing material, and not one of them meant exactly what Marcus meant. What Marcus meant was unprocessed, unmeasured, taken from actual ground outside an actual building, with whatever was living in it still living in it. "Why do you require unprocessed soil?" Dreva asked, all 4 hands moving at once. "I'll explain after I have it," Marcus said. It arrived the next morning. A container, not large. Someone had gone outside the city walls to collect it. He could tell by the color darker than the local processed substrate, with a weight to it that only comes from soil that has been doing its work undisturbed. He picked it up. He held it. Not to examine it, not to test it. He held it in both hands and let the weight sit in his palms and breathed once slowly through his nose. It smelled like something real. He held it for 4 minutes, did not plant anything, did not do anything, just held it and breathed and let the weight be what it was. Dreva wrote 3 pages. Later, through the observation screen that was set into the far wall in a way that was designed to be unobtrusive, and that Marcus had located on his first morning, Sarathvel watched the recording of those 4 minutes. Her expression did not shift. She watched it to the end. Then she watched it once more from the beginning. She filed it under primitive sensory fixation and closed the document. The seeds came a week after that. He had not asked for seeds specifically. He had asked for what he needed to garden, and the translation had apparently required a working group. The seeds arrived in a small box with a detailed scholarly annotation describing each species. None of them from Earth, all apparently edible, one of them noted by Dreva with a small notation indicating it was considered sacred in a tradition Marcus had not previously encountered. He planted the sacred one first. "You are not concerned about the religious significance of handling it in an unsanctioned context?" Dreva asked. "I'll grow it with respect," Marcus said. "That covers most of the requirements in my experience." Dreva wrote that down faster than the preceding 3 sentences combined. He planted in rows. He explained to Dreva while he worked about nitrogen, about the way plant root systems communicate through soil in a network that has no central nervous system, but functions, structurally, like one. About companion planting, the practice of placing species beside each other because proximity makes them stronger, not because anyone instructs them to benefit each other, but because they do, given the conditions. All four of Dreva's hands were moving. "You understand botanical science," Dreva said. It came out slightly stunned, which Marcus appreciated for its honesty. "My grandmother had a garden," Marcus said. He was pressing the third row of seeds in, one per hole, one knuckle deep. "She said if you can grow something, you are not completely useless." Dreva underlined the quote twice. The boy appeared on what felt like a Thursday. He was young. Marcus estimated 8 or 9, accounting for the fact that human age reading did not translate cleanly across species. He wore the plain clothing of a palace servant's household child. He stood in the doorway with the look of someone who had been told firmly not to go somewhere and had gone there anyway, and was currently in the rapid internal calculation of whether it had been worth it. Marcus looked at him. The boy looked at Marcus. Marcus picked up a seed between 2 fingers and held it up. The boy came in. His name, through Dreva's approximate translation, sounded something like Rem. Marcus called him Rem. Rem did not object. Rem was the kind of person who adopted acceptable situations quickly and without ceremony, which Marcus respected. He showed Rem how to make a seed hole. 1 finger pressed straight down, 1 knuckle deep, then withdrawn at a slight angle so the hole stayed open. Rem did it wrong twice, got it right on the 3rd try, and looked up with the expression of someone who has just solved a problem that has been bothering them without their knowing it. Dreva wrote notes on the interaction from across the room with the specific energy of someone who wanted to be unobtrusive and had failed entirely. Sarathvel watched the recording. She watched the moment Marcus corrected Rem's technique, not by taking his hand, not by intervening, but by demonstrating beside him, slowly, twice, waiting until Rem's hands found the position on their own. She did not file this one under primitive sensory fixation. She did not file it anywhere. She read Dreva's report that evening, all of it, the nitrogen cycle, the root communication network, the grandmother, the quote about not being completely useless. She sat with that last one for a while. In the morning log, she wrote the human as she had been writing it since his arrival. At the end of the entry, in a personal notation section that no one else read, she wrote Marcus Vale without thinking about it. She looked at the name, did not cross it out, closed the log. 2 days later, Rem came back. Then again the day after. He brought another child on the 4th visit, a girl whose name approximated as Lena, who was older, quicker to skepticism, and lasted exactly 6 minutes before she was on her knees in the soil asking Marcus why the companion rows were arranged at that particular angle. He explained. She listened the way intelligent people listen when they have decided something is worth their time, completely, without performing attention, just having it. 2 more children appeared over the following week. A quiet boy named Pete who said very little but worked harder than anyone in the room, and a girl named Nell who talked constantly, remembered everything, and had the habit of quoting Marcus's explanations back to him in slightly different contexts to test whether the logic was consistent. He appreciated Nell more than he would have predicted. The garden grew in a way that the palace growing rooms, with all their precise calibration, seemed to find difficult to match. He could not explain it to Dreva in purely scientific terms, though he tried. It was something about attention, about being handled and spoken to and checked on regularly. Things that are watched over in that particular way grow differently. Not larger necessarily, just more. He did not say that part out loud. It sounded like a line from something other than a practical conversation about soil management. Dreva asked him one afternoon, while Rem and Lena worked the far end of the space with the focused seriousness of people who have decided what they are doing is important, why he gardened. Marcus was quiet, long enough that Dreva stopped writing and waited. "Somebody has to remember what things looked like before," Marcus said. Dreva wrote it down word for word. Did not know what it meant. Sarathvel, reading the evening report, understood it exactly. She sat with it in a room by herself for a long time. The weight of the thing that had not been said, the word before, and the shape of what it contained, which was 6 campaigns and 37 entries in a file, and a man holding a container of dirt in both hands like it was the last fixed point in a landscape that had been moving under him for a long time. She did not update the file. The next morning she authorized an expansion of the garden space, double the original allocation. She signed it herself, noted the reason as continued scholarly observation, and sent it before she had thought about it long enough to reconsider. Rem ran through a restricted corridor when he found out, setting off 3 separate security notifications in the same hour. Marcus read the reports, said nothing, pressed the next row of seeds into the new soil, and thought about how fast things grow when the space is right. The invitation to the court event arrived without explanation. A formal document, delivered by a guard who did not make eye contact and left quickly enough that Marcus correctly interpreted the subtext, as nobody wanted to be the one standing there when he asked questions. He was given clothes, or informal dress, adapted for a human frame by someone who had clearly studied the measurements carefully and still gotten the shoulders slightly off. He wore it. He had worn worse for less reason on 4 separate occasions he could name immediately, and several more he preferred not to. The gathering was held in the East Wing, in a space large enough that the ceiling had its own independent climate near the top. Clusters of court nobility move through the room in the specific patterns of people who are performing social ease while engaged in something that is not remotely social. He had been in enough diplomatic situations and joint command briefings to read those patterns. Politics and warfare use the same body language everywhere. The position, the angle of the shoulder, the way eye contact is made or avoided, it all says the same things in every language. He took a position near the wall, not the corner. The corner is the obvious defensive choice, and obvious defensive choices announce themselves. The wall, a third of the way along the eastern face, with clear sight lines in 4 directions and 2 exit paths within reasonable distance. Old habit. Dreva materialized within 10 minutes, emerging from the crowd with a tray of small food items and the expression of someone relieved to locate a familiar reference point. "You are meant to circulate," Dreva said. "I am circulating internally," Marcus said. He took one of the small items from the tray. It tasted like something between a dried apricot and a minor disagreement. The room was wrong. Not loudly wrong, not in any way he could have pointed to on a diagram and labeled with confidence. A degree off. That low, pre-registered frequency his nervous system had learned to recognize over years of being in places that were about to change suddenly. He had felt it at Yeva Station the morning the Eastern lock blew. At Bellion, 4 hours before the forward line folded. It was not a sound. It was more like the absence of a sound that should have been there. He stopped circulating internally and started paying different attention. Not the important people. He had learned young that important people are rarely the source of the frequency. He watched the perimeter, the servers, the people whose job was to move through the room invisibly. Servers navigate a crowd by flowing around it. They know where everything is and they are perpetually adjusting to be somewhere else. One figure on the far side of the room near the secondary entrance was not flowing. He was moving with direction. That is the difference. Flow is environmental. Direction is intentional. Direction means a destination has been selected. A destination in a room like this one, at an event like this one, selected before arrival, means a decision that has already been made. Marcus tracked him, unhurried, the way you watch the horizon without appearing to watch it. The figure moved through 3 clusters of conversation, adjusted course once minimally, when a senior court member shifted position. Continued. His right hand stayed at his side in the particular way that right hands stay at their sides when they are waiting for the right moment to stop doing that. Sarathvel was 20 feet ahead, mid-conversation with an elder court official whose name Marcus had not learned. She was not watching the room. Her back was at a partial angle. She had no reason to be watching the room. This was her house and she had lived in it for a long time. Marcus was already moving before the thought had fully formed. He did not run. Running announces itself, and the announcement is its own problem. He moved at the speed that gets through a crowd without asking permission, the specific pace that reads as purposeful without reading as emergency. He reached the figure at the exact moment the moment arrived. He placed himself between the direction the figure was facing and the target of that direction. There was a sound, small and controlled, the kind of technology designed to operate without drawing attention to itself. Marcus felt the impact along his left side, the way you feel a door edge when you underestimate the width of a door frame, immediate, sharp, delivering clear information about a miscalculation. He kept his feet. The figure did not. Palace guards arrived 4 seconds later, which was their best response time, and still 4 seconds after the situation had already concluded. Marcus noted this without judgment. 4 seconds was actually reasonable. He had operated with worse. He was looking at the ceiling and doing the breathing sequence. A field medic named Owen had taught him 3 campaigns ago for exactly this class of situation, when Sarathvel pulled herself upright from the floor. Not injured, down by instinct, the correct instinct, the kind that a person develops from training that has never been tested at close range and turns out to have been good training. His coat was over her. He did not remember making that decision. His hands had handled it independently. She looked up at him from the floor. He kept his eyes on the ceiling and kept breathing. The guards took control of the room. The crowd managed its own chaos with varying degrees of success. Dreva was somewhere close by, writing things at a speed that had moved beyond note-taking into something closer to documentation as a coping mechanism. The medical room was cold and clean and smelled like every medical room everywhere, which was the smell of things being dealt with rather than ignored. The physician on duty handled the graze along his left side with the precise efficiency of someone who was determined not to show how surprised they were by the minor nature of the wound. It hurt. That was fine. Pain meant function. He had a whole philosophy on this that he had developed over years and that he kept entirely to himself, because stating it out loud made a person sound like they had something to prove. He was sitting on the low table with his shirt off, watching the physician work, when he heard her footsteps in the corridor, and then she was in the doorway. She stopped, looked at him, at the work being done, at the coat on the table beside him, the left sleeve dark with a stain that was going to be permanent. She did not have a prepared approach. He could tell because she was standing differently. Not the court posture, the shoulder back, chin level, weight distributed 4 hours stance. Something quieter. The posture of a person who has walked into a room without a script and is taking a moment to locate themselves. Why, she said. Not rhetoric, not performance. An actual question from a person who actually wanted the actual answer. I don't know yet, he said. The physician paused almost imperceptibly and then continued working. She walked in, stood at the side of the room, hands at her sides. You were close to the secondary corridor, she said. The disruption in the room provided adequate cover. You had a clear path. Probably, he said. You chose not to use it. Seems like it. She looked at him with those still pale eyes, not searching, pointing. That is not what is in the file, she said. Files miss a lot. The physician finished, set down the tools, handed Marcus a small container for the discomfort, gave the room a professional look that contained a complete editorial position on patient privacy, and left. They were alone in a cold, clean room, with one ruined coat between them on a table. The individual responsible is affiliated with a faction that has been organizing for approximately 2 cycles, she said. Her voice was even again, almost all the way even. There was still a seam in it, the place where it had been repaired, and you could still feel the difference if you were paying attention. They target court members perceived as resistant to their expansion agenda. I was considered a primary target due to my public opposition to the Eastern military campaign. Makes sense, Marcus said. He was putting his shirt back on. It did not hurt yet. It was going to. You could not have known I was the specific target. No. Then the decision to. You were there, he said. The math was simple. She looked at him for a long time. The math was simple, said the way you say 2 and 2 makes 4. Like 37 minus 1 was 36, and he had just decided quietly not to count in that direction anymore tonight. I don't know what to do with that, she said. You don't have to do anything with it. She left. The silence that came after her was not the silence of something finished. It was the silence of something that had started a few minutes ago and did not yet know what it was. Marcus put the coat on carefully. The stained sleeve had the same weight as the rest of it, heavy the specific way things are heavy after they have been used for something real. He walked back to his room. On his table, Rem had left a drawing, crayon equivalent, carefully done. Every plant in the garden, labeled in half foreign script and half the Latin names Marcus had been teaching him, the handwriting of a child who had decided that things were worth writing down because someone had shown him they were. He put it flat on the table. Stood there for a while. Not his worst Tuesday. The summons came 7 days later, not to the courtroom, to the war room. That distinction mattered. The courtroom was ceremony, architecture designed to make specific statements about where power resided and what it thought of the person standing at the center of the floor. The war room was function, smaller, harder, a long table that had been used enough to show it, a tactical display projecting in 3 dimensions above the center surface, chairs for people who intended to stay until the problem was resolved. Maps on the walls, current maps with dates in the corner, operational markings in colors that were not decorative. Marcus came in. 8 people at the table. 7 Orin, their rank readable in the details of their uniforms. 1 empty seat that was clearly intended for him, at human height, with the table edge at the right distance for his arm length. Someone had planned specifically for him. He noted that. Sarathvel was at the far end of the table. She did not look up when he sat. She was looking at the tactical display, which showed a region of space that Marcus knew by a human-assigned designation and was now seeing labeled in Orin notation for the first time. The shape was the same shape. Space has consistent geometry in every language. A senior commander, gray, compact, old in the way that long careers in difficult rooms make people old, opened the briefing. His name was Avel Dorn. He spoke the way experienced commanders speak in rooms that have bad news in them, directly, without ornament, keeping the pace steady so that what is being said has room to register. The threat was a militant faction, not a state. A splinter organization connected Marcus gathered from context and the way certain names were spoken to the group responsible for the court event. They had grown. They had resources and technology, and for the past 8 months they had been deploying a specific class of weapon against border settlements. A biological weapon. The display showed the affected settlements, locations, estimated impact perimeters, population figures. Marcus looked at the coordinates. He did not change his expression. But his hands, both of them resting flat on the table, pressed down. Not hard, just down the way hands press on a surface when a person needs the surface to be solid because something else just stopped being solid entirely. Avaldorn walked through the known delivery mechanism, the estimated stockpile volume, the three strategic options currently under consideration. Option 1, diplomatic approach, presented with the tone of a person describing a door they do not believe will open but are required by process to include. Option 2, targeted strikes on confirmed production facilities, viable but with significant gaps in the location intelligence. Option 3, a joint operation requiring detailed ground-level intelligence on the factions, operational patterns, and facility distribution. "We believe," Avaldorn said, looking at Marcus directly and for the first time, "that you have relevant field experience with this specific weapon class." The room waited. Marcus looked at the display. "Which settlements are confirmed affected?" he said. Avaldorn highlighted 4 markers. Marcus looked at each one. He did not say the names out loud. He knew the human names for all 4 of them. 3 he knew only from reports and records. One of them he knew from a morning he had been trying not to think about in specific detail for approximately 3 years. "The delivery mechanism you are describing," Marcus said. "Atmospheric dispersal, wind pattern dependent, peak effect window between 6 and 18 hours post-deployment." Avaldorn's expression changed the way the surface of water changes when something passes through it. "That is a more precise characterization than our current intelligence supports." "It is not intelligence," Marcus said. "It is observation." The room understood what that meant. Nobody said it aloud. "We need to understand the parameters for counteraction," said a second commander across the table. "Specifically, the response window after confirmed deployment." "There is no window after deployment," Marcus said. "The window is before. You stop the deployment or you do not stop it. After it is in the air, you are managing outcomes, not preventing them." The outcomes being: first hour, respiratory irritation mild, easy to dismiss. People who are going to leave do not leave yet. He kept his voice even, factual, the tone that processes information rather than carrying it. Hour 6, systemic. People who are leaving have difficulty moving by that point. Hour 12, he stopped. A half second. Hour 12 is when it concludes. The room was completely quiet. He had not used a single name. He had not said Karev 3. He had not said Owen or Dale or Clara or the name of the lieutenant who had been 24 and had always talked about going back to the town he grew up in, which was the kind of town people always say they will go back to. He had used hours. Hours are clean. Hours do not have faces. Sarathvel was looking at him. He knew it without looking back. The compass needle accuracy of it present at the edge of his awareness, but different from the courtroom, not categorizing, something quieter than that, something that was paying a different kind of attention. "Given what you have described," Avaldorn said carefully, "what is your tactical recommendation?" "Option 2, with corrected intelligence," Marcus said. "Your current facility locations are incomplete because you are looking at purpose-built infrastructure. They are not using purpose-built infrastructure. They are using secondary sites, agricultural processing facilities, climate-controlled storage operations, anything with large sealed containment and existing environmental management systems." He looked at the display. "You identify them by energy signature deviation. A food processing facility drawing 15 to 18% more power than its listed operation requires is worth examining. Cross-reference that against your current satellite data and you will find your targets." He paused. "I can walk your analysts through the pattern. I have seen it before." Avaldorn looked at Sarathvel. She looked at Marcus. "You recognized this weapon system before we identified it by name," she said. "Not an accusation. A fact being laid on the table carefully, like something that might be fragile." "Yes." "You recognized one of the settlement coordinates." "Yes." "And you did not disclose either of these things until we asked." "I disclosed them when you asked," Marcus said. The difference in those two statements, occupied the room for a moment. She looked at him for 3 full seconds, which in a room operating at this level of gravity is a measurable length of time. "You encountered this weapon class in active combat," she said. "Yes." "Which engagement?" The room waited. Marcus looked at the display. "Care of 3, he said. The silence that followed was not the silence of surprise. It was the silence of an expected word, arriving that everyone had hoped would not arrive. Karev 3 was in the file, last item on the list, the one she had paused on almost invisibly when she read it in the courtroom, the one Marcus had heard read aloud in front of a full court and had not said one word about. "You survived Karev 3, she said, very careful now. "Yes." "Your unit did not." "No." "You were the soul." "Yes," not defensive, not sharp. The word was just where it needed to be, a door closing gently and firmly and staying that way. She looked at him. He looked at the display. "I can give you the full detection methodology for the facility identification," he said. "I can work with your analysts directly on the satellite data. If you want my assessment of the strike sequencing, I can give that as well, but I would want to review the complete current data set first." He looked around the table. "Is that what you need?" Avaldorn said yes. They worked for 4 hours. Marcus at the display, taking the pointer occasionally, redirecting attention to anomalies in the energy data that the Orin analysts had classified as background noise. Not noise. Pattern. A pattern visible only to someone who had learned to read it in the specific school that does not offer enrollment but drafts its students without asking. He was good at it. Not performed good, just good, the way a person is good at something they have done enough times that it lives in the hands instead of the head. And he was doing it the same way he worked in the garden. Hands in it. Full attention on it. No ceremony around the fact that he was doing it. When Avaldorn called a break, Sarathvel followed Marcus into the corridor. He heard her footsteps and stopped. "You listed no survivors at Karev 3, she said. "That is correct. You are a survivor." He turned around. She was standing close, direct eyes, the compass needle look that did not adjust itself for the subject matter, whatever the subject matter happened to be. "Debatable," he said. She studied him. Something moved behind her expression at the level where faces do things they are not aware of. Something that was not pity he would have walked away from, but something closer to the specific weight that comes from understanding something you had not understood before and would have preferred to understand sooner. "You gave complete tactical intelligence today," she said, "including intelligence derived from direct personal experience of a significant loss." "Yes." "That information will enable the operation that prevents this weapon from being used on additional settlements." "That is the idea." "You did not have to provide it." "Sure I did," he said. She opened her mouth, closed it. "I do not understand you," she said, and it cost something to say it. Not a large public cost. A quiet, private one. He could tell not because she showed it but precisely because she did not, and for a person whose composure was the most consistent thing about her, the absence of composure at the edges was the tell. He thought about the courtroom. The file read aloud. The math of his survival applied to him like a sufficient explanation. He thought about the corridor afterward, the soil, the seeds that had been in his coat pocket since 2 systems before Orin space, which he had forgotten to mention to anyone because it had not occurred to him that it needed mentioning. "You had an incomplete data set," he said. She looked at him, and now it is slightly less incomplete. She held his gaze for a moment that had weight in it. "The operation will require 3 days to coordinate," she said. "I will need you accessible to the analysts during that period." "I will be in the garden in the morning," he said. "You know where to find me." He walked back down the corridor. Behind him, after a moment, he heard her walk the other way. The silence between them by now was not empty. It had the specific weight of something that had not been named yet but was past the point of not existing. He was fine with that. He had been carrying unnamed things for a long time. He was reasonably skilled at it. The operation took 4 days rather than 3. Marcus spent 2 of them in the analysis room with Avaldorn's team. Satellite data on a series of large screens, energy deviation spreadsheets, facility logs going back 18 months. He went through them the same way he went through everything, methodically, without urgency, with the specific quality of attention that does not perform itself but is simply present. He identified 11 primary sites. The analysts independently confirmed 9 of them. On the other 2, he walked them through his reasoning until they saw what he was seeing, which took time but less time than he had expected because Avaldorn's people were good at their work. The other 2 days he spent in the garden. Rem came every morning, ran the check sequence Marcus had taught him, moisture levels, growth markers, soil density test on the new plantings, and presented a brief summary of what needed attention with the focused seriousness of a person who has decided that what they are doing matters and is conducting themselves accordingly. He was 8 years old, and he ran the morning check better than several experienced agricultural officers Marcus had known. Lena came every other day. Pete came daily and said very little and worked the eastern beds with a precision that was beginning to produce noticeably better results than any other section. Nell came whenever she had questions, which was frequently, and her questions had been getting progressively better since the first week. Marcus worked alongside all of them, answered the questions, corrected the techniques, did not explain his reasons for any of this because he did not believe his reasons required explaining and had found over the years that offering explanations that have not been requested is usually less honest than it appears. The operation results came back the way most operational outcomes come back to people who did the preparation work but not the field work, secondhand, through corridors, from someone whose face was already telling the story while their mouth was still finding the words. 6 primary facilities addressed, weapon production capability removed, faction leadership in custody pending formal proceedings, no civilian settlements reached. The corridor emptied out. Marcus went back to the garden. The formal celebration that evening was large and architecturally unsuited to humans, which Marcus had found to be generally true of Oran formal occasions and had stopped taking personally. When nothing is built with you in mind, you carry no obligation to perform gratitude for what is provided. He stood near the window, ate the things that were edible, watched Avaldorn accept recognition with the controlled satisfaction of a person who did a difficult thing correctly and knows the difference between that and doing a difficult thing at all. Dreva arrived at his side with the reliability of a compass finding north. "You should also be receiving recognition this evening," Dreva said. "I provided information," Marcus said. "They executed the operation. That distinction matters." Dreva wrote it down, at a formal celebration, in low light, because at some point Dreva had decided that documenting Marcus was not a scholarly assignment but a personal practice, and Marcus had decided he did not object. A court official found him an hour later with the particular manner of someone delivering a request that was framed as a request and functioned as a directive, and told him Sarathvel was requesting a private audience at his earliest convenience, which was, in the specific phrasing used, preferably now. He went. Her private office was smaller than every room he had seen her in, more books than display, multiple windows, a desk that had the look of something recently arranged to appear organized, with the underlying evidence of actual work visible underneath the arrangement. He noticed both. She was standing at the window when he arrived, not seated at the desk in the posture of a person holding a formal meeting. Standing, looking out at the city below. He closed the door behind him and stood where he was, looked at the same window. The city was lit, Not extensively, steadily. The kind of illumination that means ordinary things kept running, which after the week they had all just had was not an ordinary thing even though it looked like one. She turned around. "Thank you for coming," she said. "Sure," he said. She looked at him, then at the desk. Then she seemed to reach some decision that did not involve either of those things and looked at him again. "I have prepared a formal revision of my initial court assessment," she said, "to be entered into the official record, correcting the characterization of the human species with regard to the capacity for—" "Don't," he said. She stopped. The word had not been hard, just precisely placed. "You are not wrong," he said. "Humans are what you described. We are capable of exactly what the file says. Every number in it is accurate. We are very skilled at being dangerous. We have had a long time and many reasons to develop that skill. None of that is incorrect." He looked at the window, the steady lights below. "You had an incomplete data set. You had the result and not the reason. You had what people become and not what they were before they became it, or what they were trying to hold onto while the becoming was happening." She was quiet. "The file had 37 accurate entries," he said. "What it was missing was the morning before each one of those entries, what people were doing before they had to become what the file says they became." She looked at him. "What were you doing," she said, "in the morning before?" The question sat in the air between them for a moment. He thought about Karev 3. He thought about the specific quality of that morning, cool and clear, with a low mist over the forward terrain that burned off by midday. He thought about the garden that someone in his unit had started in the space between the camp perimeter and the forward line, because nobody could say whose idea it had been originally, and nobody had wanted to be responsible for letting it die. He thought about his hands being dirty to the wrist. He thought about Owen's laugh, which was too loud for any enclosed space and perfect for every outdoor one. He thought about seeds in a coat pocket. "Gardening," he said. The word sat in the room, simple in the specific way that simple things are when they are true. She was quiet for a long moment, not the formal court silence, controlled and employed for purpose, just quiet, the kind that belongs to a person sitting with something that has changed the shape of their understanding and is finding where everything now goes. "Rem came to me yesterday morning," she said. He looked at her. "He asked me what photosynthesis was," she said. "He used your word, the human term. He told me that you had shown him that plants communicate through the soil in a network that no one can hear but that functions regardless, and he wanted to know if that was scientifically accurate." Marcus said nothing. "I confirmed the science," she said. He seemed satisfied with this. He went back to the garden. "Good," Marcus said. "He also told me," she said, with a very careful precision, "that you taught him to test whether a seed is still viable before planting it, that you hold it to the light and look for something about the internal structure." He could not recall the exact description. "Density variation," Marcus said. "A healthy seed shows it. A failed one is uniform throughout. The light shows the difference." She looked at him for a long moment. "That is not in any file about you," she said. "No. It should be." He was quiet. She moved to her desk, sat down, not formally, the other way, the way she sat when the audience for the posture was not present. "I was certain," she said. "I want you to understand the degree of that certainty. I have studied your species formally for 11 years. I have read the entirety of Oren academic documentation on humans, which is extensive and old. I reviewed contact reports from 12 colleagues with direct interaction experience. I was thoroughly, carefully, completely certain I understood what you were." He waited. "Then you sat on the floor of an oversized cell because the bench was the wrong height," she said. "You asked for food that did not taste like a power cell. You corrected the spelling of your own name in the middle of formal proceedings for a war crimes evaluation." She was looking at the desk, not avoiding him, looking at a specific point that was helping her think. None of that was in the model. "People rarely are," he said. She looked up. "I am not attempting to revise the record in order to be retroactively correct," she said. "I am attempting to correct it because it is wrong, because it describes an instrument and omits the person, because I wrote it and the correction is mine to make." "The record described a soldier," Marcus said. "That is accurate. What it missed is that soldiers are mostly not soldiers before and after. During, yes. That part is real and I am not asking you to remove it, but it is not the whole thing." She looked at him. "What is the whole thing?" she said. He thought about what to say. He thought about his grandmother's voice and the weight of soil, and a list of names he carried that had no place in any official document. He thought about Rem's face, getting the seed hole right on the third attempt. He thought about Nell's questions getting sharper every week. He thought about Pete working the eastern beds with a precision that was exceeding everything around it because Pete had decided this was something worth doing well. "Someone who gardens," he said. "That is the rest of it, before and after someone who gardens." The words sat in the air. She had no category for them. He could see her looking for one, the way a person looks for a place to put something down when all the surfaces are already occupied. And then the looking stopped. "The court will formally offer you an advisory position tomorrow," she said. "There is precedent for external consultants at that level, though none involving humans." "I know," he said. "You will decline it." He looked at her. "How do you know that?" "You did not accept the formal pardon. When Avaldorn offered a commendation at the briefing close, you redirected the credit before he completed the sentence." She tilted her head a degree, which was her version of a gesture he would have used without thinking. "You have been in this palace for 6 weeks, and the project you have invested the most time in is a garden that you are planning to leave behind." He was quiet. "You have already arranged the handover," she said. "Not a question. Rem has the system. Pete is the best physical worker I have seen in any context. Nell will ask them the right questions to keep the logic honest." He looked at the window. "Between the 3 of them and Lena checking the science, it will do fine." She looked at him with an expression that had more than one layer, and did not simplify when he tried to read it. "Where will you go?" she said. He looked at the city lights, all the steady, ordinary things that kept running without knowing they had been hours from not being able to. "Somewhere with ground in it," he said. "Somewhere that needs someone who knows what they are looking at." She nodded once slow. "The formal offer will be made in the court session tomorrow," she said. "You may decline publicly, or I can arrange a private communication." "Private is fine," he said. "Less to stage." "Yes," she said, "less to stage." They stood in the small office for a moment. No court between them. No official posture, no subject and adjudicator, no file and its subject. Just 2 people who had arrived at each other across a significant distance and a number of wrong assumptions and had mostly corrected for both. "The record I write," she said, "it will be accurate, not favorable, not constructed to reflect well on either of us. Accurate." "That is all I would ask," he said. "It will note that the initial assessment was incomplete in a specific way," she said. "That the subject demonstrated analytical and tactical capability beyond expectation, and that he demonstrated," she paused, finding the precise word, "a capacity for care that the available data did not anticipate and did not account for." He looked at her. "Capacity for care," he said. "It is the accurate term," she said. "You may suggest an alternative if you prefer." He thought about it. "No," he said, "that one is right." He left. The corridor outside was quiet. The sounds of the celebration came from the far wing, muffled and warm, the sounds of people at the other end of a difficult week. His footsteps were even on the smooth floor. The building hummed at that same low frequency under his feet, the one he had noticed on the very first walk from the holding cell to the courtroom, 3 left and 1 right and 14 doors. He went to the garden. It was dark. The plants were working. They do not require observation to do their work, which was something he had always found quietly correct about them. The long work, the root-level work, the work of growing, it happens in the dark more than in the light. He crouched down beside the eastern beds, the ones Pete had been working, pressed 2 fingers into the soil, even moisture, consistent temperature. The kind of condition that takes attention to establish, and then sustains itself once it is established. He picked up a handful of soil from the edge of the new expansion, held it in both hands. Not long, just long enough to feel the weight of it. The real weight of real things, soil that had been outside the city walls, soil that had something living in it when it was collected and still had that thing living in it now. He let it down slowly, spread his hand flat and pressed it gently into the earth. The way you press a bandage over something that has been open a long time and has finally, quietly stopped. Above him, the window let in the city light, steady and ordinary and present. On his table across the building, Rem's drawing was flat where he had left it. Every plant labeled, half foreign and half the Latin names, in the handwriting of a child who had decided that things were worth recording because someone had shown him that they were, and that the showing was enough of a reason. He was going to leave in 3 days. The garden was going to keep growing. In a file in an office in the palace above him, someone who had been certain she understood what he was, and had been wrong in a way that cost her something to acknowledge and something larger to correct, was writing a record that named what the original record had missed. Not the number, not the campaigns, not the math of survival that had seemed, standing in a courtroom weeks ago, like it explained everything. The capacity for care that the data did not contain. He thought about his grandmother's hands. He thought about the shape of a seed held to the light. He thought about Owen teaching him to breathe. He thought about Dale and Clara and the lieutenant who always said he would go back home, and he held them the same way he held the soil, not tightly, not to keep them from going anywhere, but to let the weight of them be real in his hands for a moment. Then he let them rest. He stayed in the garden for a while, no particular purpose, no task remaining, just present in a place where things were growing, the specific quality of presence that does not need to perform itself because it has nowhere else to be. The plants worked. He breathed. The city held. He had come a long way from Detroit with seeds in a coat pocket and a very specific question that he had been carrying since Karev 3, and had not been able to put down no matter how many systems he crossed or how many rooms he stood in the center of. Whether things could still grow. Whether the soil still had what it needed. Whether attention was still enough. Whether the thing that was worth protecting was still there to protect, underneath everything that had happened on top of it. He pressed his hand flat into the earth one more time. Felt it. They could. They really could.